Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Tamar Belanda, and I'm Professor of Architecture at the University of Cape Town, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all tonight as we run this event in celebration of the Italian Design Day, which is an initiative by the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs, supported this year in South Africa by the Embassy of Italy to South Africa, the Italian Consulate in Cape Town, the Italian Cultural Institute in Pretoria, and the support, obviously, of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it's a great privilege to welcome you all tonight. And the topic and the idea behind the Italian Design Day is to present so-called ambassadors of Italian design to the audience across the world. And what I have to thank the Embassy of Italy in Pretoria through the ambassador, Mr. Kukuli, and First Secretary, Dr. Ligrone, and Vice Head of Mission, Dr. Marara, for allowing me to invite this year two colleagues, Gabriele Neri and Micaela Antonucci, to share some recent research that they have been working on for a couple of years, which focuses on the work that Pier Luigi Nervi and his office produced on the African continent somewhere between 1964 and 1980. And I'm briefly going to introduce the two speakers and then let them give the presentation and try to capture some of the reasons why we think it's of interest to have this talk and open up the floor for discussions at the end. Micaela Antonucci is Associate Professor of History of Architecture at the University of Bologna. She was appointed in 2020 as the David and Judy Tobey Fellow at ITATI, the Harvard University Center for Italian Renaissance Studies. She has a long trajectory as an historian, but most recently her work has focused on Pier Luigi Nervi. She curated 2 international exhibitions on Nervi's sports facilities. And most recently, together with Gabriele Neri, our other speaker tonight, she has published Pier Luigi Nervi in Africa. Gabriele is an architectural historian and curator. He is currently a maître d'enseignement de recherche at the Academy of Architecture in Madrid, Switzerland, and adjunct professor at the Polytechnic in Milan. He will be the forthcoming Weinberg Fellow at the Italian Academy in Columbia University. And the reason, as I said, that we have invited them is because they recently published this book, Pier Luigi Nervi in Africa, of which the Italian embassy has facilitated the translation and publication of an abridged version in English, which will be available after lockdown ends. And so I will let them introduce and frame the research and try to pick up some questions at the end. And now I'll hand over to Dr. Silvia Marara, Vice Head of Mission of the Italian Embassy in Pretoria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm Silvia Marara, and I'm the Deputy Head of Mission of the Embassy of Italy in Pretoria, as Professor has said. The Italian Design Day is an initiative that was started since 4 years ago by the Ministry for Foreign Affairs to celebrate the Italian creativity through design in every aspect that we can see around us, from the furniture, from architecture, interior, and whatsoever. And this year is the 4th edition that we are celebrating of the Italian Design Day. And the theme that is guiding the events that all our embassies around the world are focusing on today is project and materials, new challenges for the sustainable recovery of the Made in Italy. So this year, as the professor was saying, the embassy and both the Consulate of Italy in Cape Town, the Italian Cultural Institute in Pretoria, and the Italian Trade Agency decided to explore the legacy of Pier Luigi Nervi, that is one of the most prominent architects and civil engineers of the 20th century. So all the stadiums, the arenas, the halls, that with this distinctive trait and choice of materials are practically all around the urban fabric of Italian cities. And Pier Luigi Nervi has been particularly active in the African continent. And however, his little research has been conducted on this fascinating subject until, as Professor was saying, Micaela Antonucci and Gabriele Neri decided to publish the book Pier Luigi Nervi in Africa. So with the assistance of Professor Berland of the University of Cape Town, who has coordinated on the academic side of the organization of this event, we asked Professor Antonucci and Professor Neri to be our testimonials of the Italian Design Day today. Together with the consulate, the embassy supported the translation and the publishing in South Africa of the excerpt of their book. And we have asked the authors to present it, introducing our public to Pier Luigi Nervi and his journey in Africa. So our wish is that this edition of the Italian Design Day may further enhance the dialogue and the cooperation between Italian and South African designers and academics, and that on the footstep of Pier Luigi Nervi, many new shared projects will arise. So today's event will be followed by another conference dedicated to the Italian design, hopefully in presence, that we plan to organize in September. The conference would be taking care in architecture, la progettazione sociale, also arranged with the invaluable assistance of Professor Berlanda, that will focus on the design of social and health facilities and their impact on the urban fabric. I wish now to warmly thank all our testimonials, moderators, and our public for joining the event, and a special greeting to the Italian ambassador to the Holy See, Pietro Sebastiani, whom I've been told is also following this event. I thank you, and now I leave the floor to our testimonials. Thank you very much indeed.
Good afternoon to everyone listening. First of all, we would like to thank the Embassy of Italy in Pretoria, the Ambassador of Italy to South Africa, Paolo Cuculi, and the First Secretary, Stefano Ligrone, the Italian Consulate in Cape Town and the Consul Emanuele Poglio, the Istituto Italiano di Cultura in Pretoria, and the Italian Trade Commission in Johannesburg. We are very proud to be ambassadors of Italian design on the occasion of the Italian Design Day 2021. We wish to thank also Professor Berlanda, who had the idea of translating our Italian research into a South African outcome. So thank you, Thomas, for all your support and suggestions. We are going to talk about an item which connects Italy and South Africa, the work of the Italian engineer Pier Luigi Nervi. None of many currently available studies on Nervi, none of the 20th century's most celebrated architects and engineers, mention his involvement with the African continent. This omission is surprising because Studio Nervi, which he ran with his sons, had intensive and complicated connections with Africa, where between 1964 and 1980, the studio was involved in around 40 projects. With the word to Gabriele for the next slide.
Yes, thank you, Micaela. Thank you, everyone. So, how can this deafening silence be explained? Based on extensive research in Italy and in various African countries, in our most recent books and in this lecture, we aim to deepen our understanding not only on the work of Pier Luigi Nervi, but also on the complex technical, media, diplomatic and management issues that the Nervi's office, the Studio Nervi, encountered in the latter part of its existence, and to examine more generally the Italian contribution to the modernization of post-colonial Africa. And so the next slide, you will see some of the materials we have worked with to carry out this research. Hundreds of folders, drawings, sheets, letters, sketches, blueprints, pictures, and whatever, in different archives in Italy, so in Rome, in Parma, in Florence, but in Africa as well, so in Cape Town and in Ivory Coast in particular.
So I will briefly present Pier Luigi Nervi, just to let you know who he is and why his work is so interesting. Nervi was one of the protagonists. Was one of the protagonists of the 20th century architecture. An extraordinary engineer, theorist, professor, contractor, and entrepreneur. And he reached and experimented with the constructive and expressive possibilities offered in particular by reinforced concrete. And he was admired and celebrated worldwide for his mastery of this material, so Master of Concrete, as the title of the previous slide. In this picture, you see the Studio Nervi in 1944. So these are the four Nervis. Is Pier Luigi at the center with his sons, Antonio, starting from left, Antonio, Mario, and Vittorio, which are the members of the Studio Nervi. The fact that his sons were involved in his work was very important for the export of Nervi's architectural models abroad, because he was widely seen as the master who works in a shop and hands down his craft from father to son, just like the medieval and Renaissance times. In 1960, a book was edited on Pier Luigi Nervi for the Masters of World Architecture series. You see it in this slide. Nervi was together with Le Corbusier, Frank Lloyd Wright, Antoni Gaudí, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, and Alvar Aalto. So he was considered as the peers a master of architecture. His work were published in the most important architectural reviews, but also in magazines such as Time, Life, The New Yorker, winning the favors of the public and earning the title of Master of Concrete. Yet, neither before nor after the demise of the studio in 1980 were the African projects given much attention. One of the key factors of the great success of Nervi was his capacity. Here we see a selection of his most important works, was his capacity to invent new shapes and new ways to build them through a unique and original method that combined construction and patents of his own invention. This dialogue between form, statics, and construction makes his work generally based on a grammar of few simple forms, articulated in different variations, but always expressive of their mechanics and assembly. This is a very famous picture. It was the fourth structure he constructed for the 1960 Rome Olympic Games, highly praised worldwide, that dramatically increased global attention on the 60-year-old Italian engineer. His buildings soon became true monuments to the idea of Made in Italy, contributing to the global diffusion of the image of the so-called Italian miracle. Here is the 18-year-old, relatively unknown American boxer, Cassius Clay, getting one of the 3 gold medals he won under the dome of Nervi's Sport Palace. The Olympics made him a star, paving the way for him to become the great Muhammad Ali. And here is an article presenting Nervi as a new Michelangelo. So the profession of engineer, purely technical in nature, suddenly became with him something nobler and intellectual. The honors he received from most renowned cultural institutions and universities worldwide helped to make him as popular as acclaimed architects of the past, such as Michelangelo. The Papal Audience Hall in the Vatican City is one of Nervi's most famous works, so tied to its author that it is known to everyone as Aula Nervi, Nervi Hall. Probably many of you have seen on TV the Pope speaking in this grand hall, and here is Pope Francis in a recent photo. This is considered one of the most important monuments of Italian architecture, since it is also on the pages of Italian passport. Now we see the two pages of Italian passports with the Nervi Hall on the left and the Rome Olympic statue on the right. No, sorry, opposite. Up to you, Gabriele.
So, well, we pass to the next slide.
Sorry.
In order to see a map showing us how, after the great success in the Americas in the 1950s and 60s, the 1970s was the decade in which the focal point of Nervi and his office, Studio Nervi's operations would shift geographically towards Africa and the Middle East. The almost simultaneous independence of most of African countries stimulated an exceptional wave of new urban infrastructure and architectural projects, the actualization of which saw professionals and firms from all over the world flocking to Africa. And of course, Italy was in the front line in this process. So starting in 1964, he began to receive dozens of commissions and requests for consultations from all over the continent and from the nearby Middle East. This is a map showing a sort of mosaic of Nervi's work in Africa, from north to south, from east to west. And we have mapped, thanks to our research, almost 40 projects in this study. And so, despite many projects weren't built, and even if actually some of them were limited to preliminary context, such a list has great potential in showing us the multifaceted relationship between Studio Nervi and Africa. So you can see here a project in Tanzania, in Kenya, Ethiopia context with Ethiopia or the Central African Republic, project in Nigeria, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, and so on. So the whole continent is somehow touched by Nervi's activity or fame. And in the next slide, we can take a closer look to Nervi's work, in which we can find a great variety in terms of architectural typologies, in terms of client, and of course also scale. For instance, here you can see the project for the Tripoli Cultural Center, which, despite never being completed, is particularly significant on account of the original architectural language of this design proposal. Because the plan was to build a sort of central structure, more or less squared in shape, in plan, but with these four concrete towers, which would take on the appearance of the minarets of the mosque. So this is the sign of a process of, let's say, translation or adaptation of Nervi's language to the culture of African countries, or, well, at least to their stereotyped iconography. In the next slide, you see a very small project, a tiny project, almost entirely self-built. And this is the monastery of the Benedictine sisters in Mafinga, a remote location in Tanzania. So quite a strange project. Not well, we are not used to look at this kind of project when thinking about Pier Luigi Nervi's work. So how did this work come to Studio Nervi? Well, it came as a result of the fame of the Nervi Hall in the Vatican City. So the sisters asked Nervi to provide a very small but important project for them in Tanzania. And Nervi donated this project. And then they adapted it to the poor means and technology that they had over there. Next slide, it's quite the opposite, because this is a mega structure imagined for Lagos in Nigeria for a railway terminal, and it was unbuilt. But here the huge scale of technology tells us of the transformation of African cities after 1960s. Well, in the next slide, we start with a specific paragraph about Ivory Coast, because it is quite surprising to note that in terms of a total number of commissions and projects, after Italy and the United States, Ivory Coast was the third most prolific country for Studio Nervi. There were in Italy about 230 projects, 38, almost 40 in the United States, and at least 16 projects in this African country, some of which included clusters of several buildings, many of which were built. This is the first and most important building completed by Studio Nervi in Ivory Coast, and it is the headquarters of the African Development Bank in Abidjan, in the downtown of Abidjan, the Plateau. The African Development Bank represented a very important client at that time, given its central role in the economy and politics of the country. And so, well, our first question was, how did Nervi come into contact with this part of Africa? And we discovered interesting and also somehow hidden plots, mixing the international fame of Nervi as an architect and the political situation of Ivory Coast and also of Togo. In fact, the introduction of Studio Nervi in Ivory Coast happened through an architect, the architect Elpidio Olimpio, who is officially recognized as co-designer of this building. It is worth digressing to examine the story of Elpidio Olimpio, because he was the son of Silvanus Olimpio, the prime minister of the French territory of Togo, and then president of the independent Togo following his election in 1961. But in 1963, his government was overthrown in a coup organized by Eyadema, and he was assassinated, while his son, Elpidio, was in the United States studying architecture at Princeton. And so, owing the friendly relations between Silvanus Olimpio and Houphouët-Boigny, the president of Ivory Coast, following the murder of his father, Elpidio, the young architect, the young student, found refuge in Ivory Coast, and he even married Marie Houphouët-Boigny, the daughter of the Ivorian president. And okay, so this is the link, because at Princeton and the United States in general, Nervi was a figure of great standing. And so we can thus trace Olimpio's decision to visit the Studio Nervi in Rome at the end of the 60s, and then offering him, thanks to his links with the upper echelons of the Ivorian government, a partnership with the scope for impressive projects in Africa. So this is a quite interesting relationship between two architects of two generations and two different countries. Actually, these relations soon deteriorated owing to frictions arising from the sense that the Italian specialists were undermining the Ivorian counterparts and vice versa. However, the Italians, Studio Nervi, managed to find alternative channels to expand their business in the country, resulting in the founding of Studio Nervi Afrique, which was, however, never formally constituted because of administrative and bureaucratic project and problems. Well, but looking at the buildings, so looking at the architecture, a strong theme emerged. The challenge of confirming, on the one hand, the special and sought-after Nervi style, while trying to adapt it to a tropical context. So if you look at this wonderful structure, this wonderful roof, supported by two sculptural concrete columns and featuring a geometric pattern which Nervi invented in Italy to save money in the 1940s, you would find a sort of blend between the so-called Nervi system or Nervi style and something which could remind you a stereotyped version of some African geometrical patterns. So, as we can see in this slide, again, it was a process of translation or tropicalization, which is even more evident looking at another building. On the left-hand side, you see one of Nervi's Italian masterpieces, the Palazzo del Lavoro in Turin, built in 1961, featuring these giant concrete umbrellas. And, well, you would find the same element in the villa design, on the right-hand side of the screen, designed for the president of the African Development Bank in Abidjan. Which is a sort of, as we can see in the next slide, is a sort of, well, halfway between a flying saucer or a postmodern tholos, with the back half closed and covered with vegetation, and the front opening onto a south-facing garden. In this project, the Italian umbrella becomes a protection against the tropical sun, creating, again, a complex twine between the Nervi style and the idea of adaptation to a specific place and climate. So this is another interesting project. We are here in Yamoussoukro, which was the new capital of Ivory Coast, and something similar happens here. Nervi built several buildings in Yamoussoukro, and among them, the most important is the private chapel for the president, Houphouët-Boigny. And the chapel was formed by joining four sections based on parabolic and hyperbolic geometry, and composed of the by now typical triangular structural mesh used by Nervi over and over again all over the world. This time, again, we could find analogies between, well, let's say, an Ivorian hut and the shape of this roof. But in this case, as you can see in the next picture quite clearly, okay, this is a picture showing you the construction process with this triangular truss of prefab elements. And this is the interior of the cathedral, where you see two pictures. First one on the left-hand side is St. Mary's Cathedral in San Francisco, and on the right-hand side of the screen, the small chapel in Yamoussoukro. So again, a sort of recycling of a previous project, but with also an adaptation, let's say tropicalization, in this case in Ivory Coast.
Okay. So let's see more closely the works of Nervi in South Africa. On 4 September 1964, Pier Luigi Nervi was asked to design a large multifunctional complex in the center of Cape Town. The slides are moving. This was the first ever African commission for the Italian engineer, who had become a post-war star architect, as we say, being invited to conduct projects all over the world with his planning studio, we have known, where he worked with his three of his four sons. The fourth was a magician, so he didn't want to deal with architecture at all. The Good Center was among the last large-scale projects produced by the Studio Nervi, and perhaps the last in which Pier Luigi himself took an active part in the design stages before gradually withdrawing from active involvement in his studio, starting in 1971. His name began to circulate in South Africa, and shortly after Cape Town, came a request from the City Council of Pretoria for a consult on the project of a rugby stadium with a capacity of 100,000 spectators. And these consultations for the stadium were on schedule, while in contrast, those for the exhibition hall in Cape Town were almost immediately blocked owing to the obstacles linked to the building restrictions imposed by South African government. So the projects remained frozen for 5 years. Only in 1971 would Pier Luigi Nervi be officially designed as a consulting architect and engineer for the Cape Townian building, which was due to be completed by May 71. This, as you see in the slide, is the letter from the Maxi Archive in Rome of the city engineer of Cape Town, Salomon Morris, asking him to accept the commission of this building, this job, and he writes, quote, not only Cape Town, but even South Africa as a whole would benefit substantially by your participation. End quote. So Cape Town wanted to become a modern town and was looking for architecture to project an image of itself as a city of the future onto the world stage. For this reason, it was decided that the exhibition hall should be entrusted to a designer with global fame, the Italian Pier Luigi Nervi. This news that the exhibition hall project was to be entrusted to a celebrity immediately garnered the attention of the press and hit the front pages of the local newspapers, which for the most part expressed enthusiasm about it. But at the same time, there was also no shortage of polemics. Many voices raised in opposition to the involvement of a foreign professional, as opposed to engaging local talents. This article, you see it in the slide, is entitled A Poetic Structure, Cape Town Needs Nervi's Vision, published in the daily The Cape Times on 24 July 1969, 2 days after the first man landed on the moon, responds to this criticism as follows, quote, that we have got good local architects is not in question, nor that we have competent engineers. But it is questionable whether there is any one local designer who combines, on the level that Nervi does, the qualities of engineer, architect, and operational visionary. Obviously, continues the journalist, the involvement of Nervi is certainly not a guarantee of success for the project, but on the basis of his reputation, and more importantly, on the evidence of his buildings, there is little reason to doubt that he will produce the most significant and exciting public structure that his budget will allow. Again, another article on a local newspaper. This is the Cape Argus on October 18, 1979, entitled The Man Who Writes Poems in Concrete. This article presents Pier Luigi Nervi's career, his design philosophy, and his grand international achievements. And, quote, Cape Town will have its own example of the Nervi genius in the new exhibition hall. It will be utterly functional, but it will also be a thing of beauty of which the city will be proud. And this is the first architectural design for the exhibition hall completed at the end of February 1970. The complex would occupy an irregular trapezoid lot bounded by Piero Street, New Market Street, and Sir Larry Road. The Piero Street facing portion would be occupied by the main hall, which would be abutted by an ancillary building housing the small hall and other facilities. The main hall would be a great open space, square in shape, covered, as you can see in this model, with a structure of never-before-seen features and dimensions. A giant crossbow built from prefabricated elements, which would form the largest reinforced concrete structure of its kind in the world. Apart from this model of the project, was produced also an even larger model, which presented the project within the plans for the new District 6 after the demolition of the old quarter, proposed by the City Council, to which the exhibition hall would be connected by a monumental bridge. The project, however, experienced another unexpected setback when the South African State Treasury failed to approve the inclusion of this building in the Council Capital Programme for 1971. So this blocked the availability of funds and forced the municipality of Cape Town to delay construction. Contact with the Studio Nervi would only be resumed in November 1972, when finally funds were freed up. A joint venture was thus constituted in 1973 with the Cape Town-based firm Colin & Meiring, both for planning and management of works of the exhibition hall. This is the final project. To contain cost and reduce spending, a new version with drastic revisions was put forward. One of the main features were the support bases at the corners of the structure, upon which the crossvault would rest. As you can see in this slide, these massive inclined concrete piers. The operational plan in place, a significant snag, delaying the start of the construction works. The problem was the application of the Nervi construction methods in the context of South African building practices, for which finding an appropriate local contractor was essential. So only in March 1975, the contract with the Cape Town-based firm Murray & Stewart for the construction of the exhibition hall was signed in the office of the Mayor of Cape Town, David Bloomberg, in the presence of all the interested parties. At the time, the working relationships with South African partners had extended to other buildings, such as the Golden Acre Shopping Centre that Murray & Stewart was building in Cape Town on behalf of Lewis Carroll Architects, a local firm, which had asked Studio Nervi to consult on the design of a large roof covering the central space of the mall. This, as you can see in this slide, is a drawing of the roof project from the Maxi Archive, which, however, was never constructed. Work began in April of 1975, and several times in the following years, Studio Nervi had to enter into a series of dexterous negotiations with the local builder, Murray & Stewart, to adapt their construction methods. The construction of the giant cross-vault was achieved using the so-called structural prefabrication, a system patented by Nervi. The structure, as you can see in this slide, was decomposed into single modular pieces, which would then be hoisted into place and cast together to form a single solid structure. In order to raise the arches and the sections of the vault using the structural prefabrication, the company had to build an imposing and complex scaffolding of steel tubing on adjustable supports. Here we can see it, a sort of steel hill facing the stone mountain. These are the prefabricated modules which compose the vault. The site where this coffers forming a vault would be prefabricated had to be moved close to the building site, because transporting them from the Murray & Stewart production site in Filippi would have been too expensive. Each of the 4 sections of the vault, divided by the 2 diagonal arches, was composed by 2023 precast triangular coffers, totaling 892 modules. Internally, the interdos of the vault would exhibit a ribbed surface of regular geometric patterns, formed by leaving in view the joints of the triangular crossers of which it is composed. This is typical of Nervi's design, which combines geometry and construction, creating what he called the aesthetic expressiveness of the structure, as we can see in all these, most of the famous buildings and monuments built by Nervi. While construction proceeded with highs and lows, there were discussions about the naming of the structure, which up to this point had been referred to as Nervi Hall, just like the Papal Audience Hall in the Vatican City. A flurry of proposals erupted, among them the idea of officially christening the building Nervi Hall. But in the end, the winning proposal of a public contest was settled on, and the building was baptized as the Good Hope Center. The local press celebrated in enthusiastic terms the world record building that Cape Town could now proudly present to the world. On 2 September 1977, the official opening of the structure took place with much fanfare. Antonio Nervi gave a short speech and handed a symbolic key to the mayor. On 3 September, the day after the grand opening, the Weekend Argus, a progressive daily paper, published an article entitled Multi-Race Theatre Calls as Good Hope Center Opens, thus publicizing the announcement of the Cape Town mayor, John Tyers, that the multifunctional center planned by Studio Nervi would be open to all races, although with some limitations. The fact that this building, which was the most iconic in Cape Town at that time, and perhaps in the whole of South Africa, was one of the first to break with the apartheid taboos, is significant. It almost seemed that the Good Hope Center, which had garnered the attention of the world owing to the fame of its designer and to its exceptional form and structural quality, would be used by the municipal government as a sort of calling card to present the city as being ready to overcome segregationist policies. Up to you, Gabriele.
Thank you, Micaela. So, well, as you can see, so many issues emerge from Nervi's buildings in Africa. And so, in conclusion, we would like to raise a further issue about this outstanding activity. Well, since almost all the buildings that we have showed you today were so far forgotten or anonymous buildings, considered as anonymous buildings, what should we do today with such an heritage? Well, the evaluation is not easy, of course, due to their extreme variety, their state of conservation, their role in their specific context, and so on. This is a picture taken in Cocody, a district in Abidjan, where these villas, these houses for the vice president, president, and vice president of the African Development Bank were abandoned after during the civil war in the last decade. So, well, sometimes this is a forgotten or almost forgotten heritage. So what we really hope is that that this research could trigger a debate and of course further studies, which could give us all a wider comprehension of the role of modern architecture in African cities, the role of Italian engineering and architecture in this continent, and of course the problems related with the preservation of these outstanding heritage. From this perspective, again, the Good Hope Center is an interesting case study, as we can see in the next slide, because after more than 30 years of use as a community facility, this building was closed officially for public use at the beginning of 2016 after a heated debate. despite opposition, the city council decided to turn the building into a movie studio for a period of about 3 years. And this is a quite amazing picture, because in a British adventure drama miniseries of 2016, well, this series was dedicated to the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. The very tomb of Tutankhamun was reproduced within the main hall of the Good Hope Center, under Nervi's gigantic roof, as this picture shows. So you can see the truss of Nervi's vault, the Nervi style, the Nervi system, and then the outer part of Tutankhamun's tomb. And inside, it looked like the next picture. No, there's another picture before. Okay, no, so we don't have it, but okay, it showed an Egyptian cave or an Egyptian tomb. It was quite amazing. But as this new picture, probably the latest picture of the Good Hope Center, shows, due to the pandemics, this building came back to a public function, being used as a COVID-19 center. So, well, this is not the conclusion, of course, but it's sort of ongoing process of reconsidering the original function of the Good Hope Center. And so we don't know what the future of the Good Hope Center will be. We don't know what the future of all the other buildings will be. But also thanks to these pictures, we think that a public debate could continue, and one that could include architecture, engineering, but also politics and beyond. So we thank you all for your kind attention, and I think the floor now is open for questions and comments, remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabriele and Micaela, for a really inspiring talk. And before opening the floor for questions, I just wanted you to try and summarize a couple of points which really point as this today's event unfortunately is happening in remote, but it's really also to celebrate the publication of Pier Luigi Nervi in Africa in its abridged English version, which the Embassy and Consulate and Italian Cultural Institute facilitated, which I really hope that will be available soon after we move out of level 4 lockdown. And because I think it points to the center of the question of, beyond Nervi, what is the role of architectural research? What is the role of research in architectural history across Italy and Africa, or South Africa specifically, following the clues which are partly in the archives, and I think one of your initial images was really exciting. And second, in terms of instead, what is the general perception of the public of such structures? And I think one of the obviously elements of discussion and debate around Nervi's structures is that even though they might appear monumental and possibly, you know, well-resolved engineering and architectural structures, they remain fairly silent. And so what is the interaction? What is the perception? What is the understanding of that work now 50, 60, 70 years later? And how does one place it within a cultural context? And I think from my side, I would say that one of the questions which remains completely unanswered and which would be interesting to debate further is, what was Pier Luigi Nervi's and his sons and his office understanding of the dynamics, political, economic, social dynamics, where they were operating, and particularly, you know, through the 1960s, the decade in which many African countries finally find independence outside colonial rule, and into the 1970s. And so I think that sort of like the role of architectural inquiry today across borders and being able to nuance and add new meaning to archival work, I think would be really intriguing. And for that, I want to thank the opportunity to discuss that. So I wonder if we can take maybe questions from the audience, or if you want to try and answer my couple of points. I'll leave it up to you, really.
I was just thinking about the fact that human fame is sort of fluctuating, so up and down through decades and centuries. So Nervi's fame as well changed so much, or had a strange flow from 1960s to 2021. Because in the 1960s it was, probably today we would compare its fame to the fame of Renzo Piano, an architect, an Italian architect who is well known worldwide, probably more. But in the 1980s and 90s, his fame somehow went down after his death. This is one of the many layers which somehow had us to a less or more precise and consideration towards these buildings. So a building probably is anonymous, or often is anonymous until you know more things, further details, and about his origins, about his history, about his artistic features, and so on. So in this process of hiding and discovering the features of a building, of architecture, but also for a work of art, I think that we should be always curious, and then of course there's the need for also a broader view on architecture, which cannot depend only on the fluctuating fame of these masters of concrete or of some other material, but should be something more connected with let's say, critical perception of our cities and our urban landscapes.
Thank you. I would like to open the floor, and maybe if there's any questions from the audience, if you can, I don't know how this works, if people raise a hand, or you can just put your mic on and video on and say your name and the question, and then we'll take maybe one at a time. Or
there is one hand from the embassy, I think.
Yeah, it's actually Stefano of the embassy. I would like to ask our speakers, especially Micaela, to show to the public a picture of the project of the stadium in Pretoria, to actually ask our public's help to gather more information on this project, to see if there is something that is known about how did it develop. We couldn't find much. We know that it is not the Loftus Stadium, it's something else that was probably not developed as first designed by Nervi. But still, it would be interesting if, with the help of our public, we can find out more. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't show a picture because actually we don't have a project. We have this plan of the area. We have a name, Gruwe Stadium. We know that it was. Can
you show again the picture of the area design?
at present, the Curriculum Stadium, I think it's a tennis stadium or something like that. And I don't think that was the project. My opinion is that maybe this stadium was never built, maybe, because I couldn't find actually a stadium with that name and that number of people hosted in Pretoria. But while you make other questions, I will try and find the only image we have of the area.
Maybe just a comment. I know quite well the area of Kronkloof in Pretoria, and there are no stadiums there. So maybe it was, as Micaela was saying, has never been built because there are no stadium, not even small, in Kronkloof.
That's also my opinion, yes.
For what I get, that Kronkloof was indicating a wider area back then in the 60s than the area that is now known as Kronkloof. So
yeah, that's a good point.
It's still possible that some structure was built, but surely not of the size of the stadium that was initially designed by Nervi. It could be the stadium of the University of Pretoria. That's my hypothesis.
This is the only map we
Yes.
have, and the area is very small, so I really couldn't, find out where it is exactly. There are no further indications on the drawing, so I don't know. Maybe it was never built.
But the street, those streets, we can pinpoint those streets.
But they have no name. Maybe. Oh yeah. Maybe they have.
George Storrat. I know where that place is.
Yeah.
Give me a second. I'm going to map it out.
Is there a stadium there?
Good evening.
My wife and I both lived in Pretoria, and that we recognize that area. The circle on the bottom left would be the Fountains traffic circle.
Correct.
George Storrat Drive is the main drive at the bottom. That is quite right. There was never any construction, anything remotely like that. The hill, the ridge at the top of the picture would be where the new, late 1960s University of South Africa main building is. And the plain to the left of the proposed stadium was in fact originally the brickworks from which most of Pretoria was built, the Kirkness brickworks. George Storrat Drive is still as is. The rest, where the stadium is meant to be, is now mostly lecture buildings, office buildings of one of the campuses of the University of Pretoria.
Correct.
But to the best of our knowledge, there was never even the start of a stadium built there.
I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the map?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So this one here is George Storrat.
Yes.
And the stadium would have been here where it says University of Pretoria, which of course is not.
Where it says UP Kronkloof, yes.
Yeah.
There is, it looks like, there is an oblong thing there. Okay, those are just sports fields. Yeah, so where the sports fields are now used to be the brickworks.
Yeah.
And at the top left, you can see the University of South Africa buildings spread out along that ridge. Yeah. And yes, as you say, where the stadium would have been is now just university buildings.
Correct. Yeah. So in this, where this building is, basically the stadium would have been. So I think, as Micaela said, this has never been built.
Not even begun.
Yeah. No.
Thank you. We have solved the mystery of the stadium. Thank you so much.
It's a great information for us.
But Nervi was paid as well for his consulting anyway.
Thank you. I think that was really exciting unfolding. And that points to the importance of human intelligence besides the archive. And I wonder if there's any other questions.
Thank you. I saw a hand waving on the screen. Maybe, yeah.
It's me, Maria Paschini. So I just wanted to ask, so those are the only two designs he did for South Africa, or were there any others?
Yeah, only these two, yeah. And the Golden Acre roof, but also it was never built.
Yes, there is only we showed you a very beautiful drawing of the entire roof of this shopping mall, but actually they built only a small gallery where you could see today a Nervi roof, but it's quite hidden from the ceiling, and so it was only a minor version of this outstanding project.
Yeah, we were very disappointed when we went there looking for the roof in the mall, but we didn't find it. Okay, I saw a message on the chat that someone was saying that the Group Semper is still used as a movie set.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I agree with Anne-Marie, who's writing, the villa for the African banquet with the central umbrella is marvelous. And well, yes, it's marvelous, and it was a great trip, great experience in this garden full of tropical vegetation and peacocks and animals like running inside the
alligators.
Yes, alligators in Yamoussoukro. It was pretty.
Okay.
But, so this quite surreal landscape of 1970s Italian architecture with Italian ceramic tiles, Italian details, Italian materials built in Ivory Coast, but abandoned. This was January 2020 when we visited that compound. So quite an amazing experience and an amazing umbrella as well.
Okay, there's some really interesting comments in the chat. I don't think we're going to read all of them, but I think it's exciting to discover these pieces of history.
Well, once again, I wish to thank warmly our public and our speakers and our moderator, co-organizer, Professor Berlanda. So we wish to see you again in our next events. We'll have also another design-themed event in September, which might be in person if we can. That's what our hope. And on this note of hope, with the Center of Good Hope in Cape Town, we close this meeting. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.